I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
Well, here we are, the two of us back together again, and today we are going to be talking about the classic Jim Varney character, Ernest P. Worrell. Know what I mean?
I know what you mean now, because as we discussed last week in our outro, I had never seen an Ernest movie until this week.
Yeah, this would not have been the first one that I would have picked for this podcast. Jim Varney, who plays Ernest P. Worrell, did 4 of these Ernest movies for Disney. I would have preferred Ernest Goes to Camp, but that's not streaming anywhere. In fact, Ernest Saves Christmas is the only Ernest movie that is streaming anywhere, which is very weird, but yeah. Of course, Jim Varney, like I said, primarily known for playing the Ernest character. But I think there's a whole generation who probably may not have known him as Ernest, but know him as the voice of Slinky Dog in the first 2 Toy Story movies. Or maybe you're of that age that you saw him as Jed Clampett in the movie version of the Beverly Hillbillies. Which one would you have saw him in first?
Well, I actually saw him as Ernest first. You know, we're old enough to have lived through the quote-unquote golden age of Ernest. But, you know, let's go ahead and get into it. Ernest did not start out as a film character.
No, Ernest started out in commercials. Jim Varney and an ad executive named John Cherry were working on a series of commercials locally for the Nashville area. Theme parks, local restaurants, car dealerships, stuff like that. And those commercials kind of got the eye of other brands, and hey, this Ernest guy is really funny. Let's have him talk about our merchandise. And now you're getting Ernest doing soda commercials and cereal commercials and commercials for TV networks and so on and so forth. According to Jim Varney, he had done over 800 commercials as the Ernest character for various products.
Yeah. And that's how I remember Ernest first. I mean, he did a major ad campaign for Coca-Cola back in the day.
The commercials were so popular, and I am not joking about this. They were selling videotapes of the commercials. That's how popular these Ernest commercials are, where people were going to the store and buying a videotape that just contained the Ernest commercials. That is amazing. And they sold. People were buying these things. And the character got so popular that Jim Varney was then doing public appearances as the Ernest character. This is actually how he gets involved with Disney, in that he was doing a public appearance at, of all things, the Indianapolis 500 as the Ernest character, and also at the Indy 500 was Mickey Mouse, the very same Mickey Mouse that you see at the Disney parks all the time. And it was the Ernest character that was getting a bigger reaction than Mickey Mouse. Michael Eisner was actually at that event as well and took notice and says, we can do something with this. And it's very interesting because around the same time, we've said this before, how studios like to jump on trends, you know, fantasy movies are big, we need a fantasy movie of our own. Young adult novel turns into movies that are popular, we need some of our own. What had come out just a few years before all of this? A little movie called Pee-wee's Big Adventure, starring Paul Reubens, who used to work at Disney, and directed by Tim Burton, who used to work at Disney. This is me pulling it out of my own butt, this is my own thought process, but I always figured that Disney missing out on Pee Wee Herman was one of the reasons why they were so interested in getting the Ernest character, because he could be the next Pee Wee Herman. I mean, we grew up in that era of these very popular, you know, we would call them viral characters now. You had Pee Wee Herman, you had Ernest P. Worrell, you had Elvira, stuff like that.
And only one of those was not built on being just annoying as their only character trait. Thank you, Elvira. But yeah, the reason, now that we've discussed a little bit about the origin of this character, we lived through the Ernest fad. And I remember those commercials being everywhere. I remember his appearances being everywhere. That's how I first knew Jim Varney. He just was Ernest. And that is why I had never seen an Ernest movie until, this week. Because I remember being a little kid and seeing Ernest everywhere and thinking, I cannot imagine sitting through this for 2 hours. Like, I hated sitting through it for 30 seconds.
How about 30 minutes? Because there was an Ernest TV show. Ironically aired on the same network as Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something. I don't know if it came up when we last talked about Paul Reubens, but I've never seen a Pee-wee movie either. And I've never seen a full episode of Pee-wee's Playhouse. And it's the same reason why I've never seen an Ernest movie until now. Which is fascinating because I have nothing but the utmost respect for both Paul Reubens and Jim Varney. They are amazing actors and they were, amazing creative people. And I like them in everything I've seen them in, except for the characters they are most known for.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if you can hunt down one of Jim Varney's stand-up routines he did before in pre-Ernest, it's good. Jim Varney really wanted to be a character actor. And I think that had he been able to break away enough from the Ernest persona, that he probably could have been one. But also his untimely passing kind of made that also not happen. I want to get into that just quickly. Jim Varney did 4 Ernest movies for Disney. Ernest Goes to Camp in 1987, Ernest Saves Christmas in 1988, Ernest Goes to Jail in 1990, and Ernest Scared Stupid in 1991. And after those movies, the 4th movie not doing as well, Disney kind of ends their agreement, and Varney and Cherry continued to produce the movies independently. One, because the movies themselves were cheap to produce, and number 2, even though theatrically the movies were not doing as well, they were making a killing on home video. So the remaining movies were released on home video, which gives us Ernest Rides Again in 1993, Ernest Goes to School in 1994, Slam Dunk Ernest in 1995, Ernest Goes to Africa in 1997, and Ernest in the Army in 1998. And that would be the final Ernest film, because it was around that time that Jim Varney was diagnosed with cancer, and he would sadly pass away in 2000. Just, cancer sucks, and don't smoke, kids. But the point is that had he lived further than that, would he have been able to break away from the character? Would he have been able to show himself more? I mean, he's done other stuff. He didn't just do Ernest movies. We talked about he was in Beverly Hillbillies. He did a couple of other films. And I think that if he wasn't locked in to the Ernest character, he probably could have done more and been more of a character actor in other things. But things are what they are. And, he didn't resent it, but it was like any actor doesn't want to be one character forever. Granted, it was a different situation, but even Paul Reubens retired the Pee-wee character for a while. There was other TV specials. One of them that I remember was a special called Ernest Goes to Splash Mountain, which was one of the partnerships with Disney, in which Ernest would go to Disneyland and be the very first person to ride Splash Mountain when it originally opened. I remember it being a funny special. I hadn't seen that special in like 30 years. But yeah, I've wanted to do an Ernest movie for the podcast for a while. Again, I wanted to go to camp, but just not available anywhere. And I would really like to know why Christmas is the only one that's available. This movie has a very interesting fact about it. This was the first film to be filmed at the Disney MGM studios. Freshly opened. The studio itself wasn't even completed when they started filming this movie. But yeah, it was that weird time in the late 80s and early 90s where Orlando was trying to be the East Coast Hollywood, and they were trying to get more movies made in the Florida area. Universal was opening their studio park in Orlando. Obviously, Disney had the MGM studios, and they were filming movies. They were filming TV shows. We've talked about it before, how quite a number of the Disney Renaissance movies were animated at the Disney MGM studios. But the first one to be filmed, live action film, was Ernest Saves Christmas. The house that we see, Vern's house and Ernest's house, are all filmed on the Disney MGM Studios lot, and the houses were there for a long time. If you were going on the studio tour at the Disney MGM Studios, you could have seen these houses. Unfortunately, that whole back lot no longer exists. It's Galaxy's Edge now. So there's your history there. So let's get into the movie proper, the plot here. Ernest is a cab driver, and he ends up picking up Santa Claus at the airport. And Santa Claus has come to Orlando because he is getting old, and it is time for him to pass the mantle of Santa Claus to someone new. Yes, this is one of those movies where not only is Santa Claus real, but Santa Claus is a title that is passed down through the generations, and there have been multiple Santa Clauses before, and there will be multiple Santa Clauses after. And Santa Claus has come to Orlando to meet a children's television show host named Joe, because he is the right guy for the job. He's dedicated his life to the entertainment of children, and Joe himself recently had his TV show canceled and wants to move on as an actor, and his sleazy agent wants to put him in more adult roles, including a horror movie that becomes a big plot in here. Along the way, they meet a teenage girl named Harmony, who is a runaway and is very much, I don't believe in Santa Claus, I don't believe in Christmas. And yeah, that is the opening plot of the movie.
Yeah, it's kind of thin on plot. Let's just be honest.
All of the Ernest movies are very thin on plot. Jim Varney was a very physical actor, so a lot of the movie relies on physical gags, which is very interesting to talk about in an audio medium.
Like I said, I did not watch any of these movies when they were originally popular because I thought, I can barely put up with this character for 30 seconds for a commercial. I am not sure I could put up with this character for 2 hours. And then, a little behind the scenes thing here, but I was the one that suggested that we do this for the holiday season, because I thought, as an adult, I respect Jim Varney, and, so many people find this a nostalgic thing, and there has to be more to this character, if they did so many movies off of it, and, And it turns out that no, there was nothing more to this character, which kind of made me sad.
I mean, a lot of the Ernest character comes from physical comedy. A lot of it comes from kind of his rubber face mugging to the camera. A lot of it is also Jim Varney playing other characters. In the movie, Ernest puts on various disguises to help Santa Claus out. And all of them are just other characters that Varney has played in other productions, kind of bringing those characters into the Ernest world. But there is a bit of warmth, a heart, I guess you could call it, because he's, yes, he is a bumbling idiot. Ernest is a bumbling idiot, but he's trying to do the right thing. Like, when he finds out that the old man that he's recently befriended is in fact the real Santa Claus, he does everything in his power to help Santa Claus out. It's like, what are you going to do? Say no to Santa Claus? And that is one of the things about the Ernest movies, is they expand about him. Yes, he's an idiot, but his heart's in the right place. I like the part where in this movie, Ernest is a cab driver, and when he finds out that Santa Claus only has play money in his wallet and not real money, there's that moment where he goes, you know what? It's Christmas. It's on the house. And then getting fired from his job because he gave one free ride too many. There's that, I like that little bit of backstory from his boss. Like, Ernest has this, as the boss says, he's a good Samaritan to a fault, that he tends to give free rides to people. While it's good in that regard, it's not so good if you're a businessman trying to make money. But, you see that Ernest, even though he's an idiot, he's a good guy underneath it all. And one of the conversations that's had over the years when it comes to this movie is, why didn't Santa Claus choose Ernest to be the new Santa Claus? He's clearly a good person. He clearly cares about Christmas. And he clearly, doesn't want to let the children of the world down by letting the magic of Christmas be erased forever. If this Joe guy doesn't want to be Santa Claus, why not Ernest?
And I think the answer to that is, I don't think Santa Claus is supposed to be an annoying character. And Ernest's entire personality is, he's annoying. Maybe his heart's in the right place or whatever, but the entire point of Ernest is he's annoying.
And that was kind of the point of the commercials as well, and we kind of see that in the film. Part of what made those commercials popular is he's this annoying guy that bothers his neighbor, Vern. We never see Vern. Vern is the camera. That's literally it. Ernest talks to the camera is Vern, and Ernest is very annoying to Vern, and he's had it up to his head with Ernest and kicks him out of his house at the end of every commercial. He opens his window to tell him the glory of Mountain Dew or Mellow Yellow, and Vern just slams the window on his hands. Or Vern is on the rooftop doing work, and Ernest is climbing up and saying, "Hey, Vern, did you hear about this new drink that I want to tell you all about? It's good for you." And Vern will just kick the ladder off the roof, and Ernest will fall down and take a fall. So it's like, that's kind of the commercials, is Ernest is annoying, his neighbor has had enough of him, and to the point where he's causing Ernest physical harm. That's the punchline, is that Ernest is annoying, Vern has had enough, physical harm, and then the commercial ends, have a laugh. Because Ernest has his comeuppance. How do you transfer that to a movie and expand that where he's actually interacting with other characters? While Vern is in the movie, again, you never see him. But you have to make Ernest a likable character. That's one of the things about these movies, is how do you transfer that 30-second commercial of a guy annoying his neighbor and expand that to a 2-hour movie?
And the answer is, not well.
You could technically do this movie without Ernest at all, because the majority of the movie is centered around Santa Claus trying to pass the mantle on to Joe. And his swarmy D-bag of an agent just wants to focus on Joe's career, and hey, children's television isn't going to get you anywhere. I got you a role in this movie, and it's a horror movie, and we want you to do this, that, and the other. You can't be a kid entertainer forever. And he's very uncomfortable in this movie because they want him to swear. It's involving a lot of violence, and he's uncomfortable with the violence.
I will kind of give this movie one thing, in that we are led to believe that he is going to be in just a straight up Christmas movie.
Christmas Sleigh.
Yeah, Christmas Sleigh. And then once Santa Claus ends up on set and we kind of see what's going on, he's like, I thought this was a Christmas movie, Christmas Sleigh. And they're yet like, yeah, SLAY, it's a horror movie. And Santa Claus is, absolutely taken aback by that anybody would make a Christmas horror movie.
That you looking forward to the remake of Silent Night, Deadly Night?
Actually, that's the first I've heard of it, so I don't know. I'm open to seeing what's going to go on with that. I'll have to look it up.
Listeners, have you ever seen Black Christmas? I could rattle off about a half dozen or more Christmas themed horror movies.
Yeah, and some of them are very interesting and some of them are garbage. But I will say that the reveal actually works because they don't really give it away until Santa Claus is standing there and, sees that kind of along with the audience.
Yeah, because we're throughout the movie, I had this. Hey, there's this new movie. It's Christmas Sleigh. The star had to bow out due to an accident. You're in, and then we see him having the screen test with these two kids, and you think, oh, he's gonna play the dad to these two kids, and it's a warm-hearted Christmas movie. Ah, and then we finally see them on set, and it's like, yeah, you better go up to your room, and it's getting late. Santa Claus is gonna be here real soon. Okay, Dad. And then here comes an alien, and then Joe grabs the gun. You get out of my house, you son of a... You son of a... Do I really have to swear in this movie? So yeah, the idea of this former children's television show host holding a gun at a monster about to swear with children in the room. Granted, as the director said, it's nothing these kids haven't heard before, but it's like, because they're professional actors, they do this thing. Fine, sure, whatever. But, it's Joe that's uncomfortable with it because this was his job. His job was entertaining children, and now his agent and this director wants him to point a gun at someone and swear, which he is finding very uncomfortable. I mean, it would be the equivalent of, again, this is 1988, Mr. Rogers in the horror movie, or if you want to get a little further in the timeline, Steve from Blue's Clues doing one of these things, although I think he would have killed at it.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the actor that plays Santa Claus here, Douglas Seal. And he does have a Disney connection because he is the voice, or was the voice, of the Sultan in Aladdin. He does a really good job playing Santa Claus in this movie, especially his reasons why he needs to pass the mantle down. He's starting to forget. As he says, he needs to start writing things down, make sure the right kids get the right presents. The reason he has play money in his wallet is because he accidentally put all of his real money in a toy cash register that's going to another kid. He's not in a position to be Santa Claus anymore, and he needs to pass down the magic, or the magic of Christmas will be lost forever because he's losing his magic. He's even forgetting kids' names, although he does have those moments of clarity where, like the one person that works at the airport says, "Oh, thank you, Skippy." Skippy? No one's called me Skippy since. He knows all about Ernest. He knows all about Harmony's backstory, how she's a runaway, and her she should call her mother, and her mother misses her. And speaking of Harmony, Harmony played by Noel Parker. Not a lot of roles for this actress. Outside of this movie, her most well-known role was playing Amy Fisher in a movie about all of that. Harmony's very interesting. She's on the street, she's making up lies to try to get out of the problems she's put herself in. Oh, like, my brother will be here soon and he'll pay for my meal. Hey, it's over there, and all that stuff. And he, the guy at the restaurant is chasing her. She gets into Ernest's cab. Yeah, that's my uncle. He makes me work at that restaurant all hours of the day. Thanks for getting me out of there. But yeah, she is the skeptic, because we always need a skeptic in these kind of movies where Santa Claus is real, and that itself is always a thing. Like, hey, if Santa Claus is real, why do people not believe in him, and blah 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 blah. And I think that's going to be a conversation for next week's movie. Sneak preview on that. But the point is that she has lost her Christmas spirit, and she's lost kind of her innocence, and that she wants to grow up and be a star. That's why she ran away to Orlando in the first place, because she wants to be famous. Like I said, this was at a time where Orlando wanted to be the Hollywood on the West Coast, and she thought she can get her big break there. Like, when they find Santa's magic sack, and, Ernest kind of goofs around, he doesn't really know how the magic works, and he's pulling out these really stupid things out of the sack, and Harmony tries it herself, like $1 million or some jewelry or something, something that'll make her rich really quick, and the magic doesn't work for her either.
The thing about it is that you said that she's like the skeptic of the film, but the thing is that everybody is skeptic of the film. Nobody believes that Santa Claus is Santa Claus. I mean, everybody that is in this movie over the age of like 10 does not believe this guy is Santa Claus. Strangely, Ernest is the one that kind of follows the logic train into the station faster than anybody else because, like, he is confronted with a magic sack that magics toys, and it was handed to him by a guy who claimed to be Santa Claus. So, I mean, what else are you going to think in that situation? And then everybody else is like, nah, that can't possibly, there's got to be another explanation for this. And it's like, well, I don't know. Even Occam's razor is going, probably Santa Claus at that point, you know? But nobody in this movie believes he's Santa Claus until they have like some like really hardcore proof. Ernest is the first one to believe he's Santa Claus. I mean, there's the whole plot point where the scummy agent gets him locked up in jail for saying he's Santa Claus, you know?
Yeah. But like I said, the agent is probably the closest thing we have to a villain because of how smarmy he is and how he really wants to push Joe into taking these non-children entertainment roles and all of that. And like I said, he's getting Santa Claus arrested because he thinks he's a crazy man. He's just saying, hey, Joe, just go along with this thing. It's it's going to be fine. Don't listen to this crazy old man. Listen to me. But, like, nothing happens. There's no comeuppance for the agent. There's no comeuppance for any of the Hollywood people in this movie. They just disappear from the movie right before the final act. It's like, we're going to make this movie and you're not a big enough star to make the demands you're asking for, Joe. And just to throw out there, since we talked about the other characters, Oliver Clark plays Joe. I only really know him from this movie, but he's like a workaday actor. If you watch a TV show between like 1970 and 2000, he's probably done it.
Yeah, he's one of those, hey, it's that guy.
Yeah. He does a good job as Joe, especially when when we first meet Joe, he's at the Children's Museum doing a puppet show, and he really does give off that Mr. Rogers vibe in his first appearance, and very much,
I just wanted to point out while we're talking about, hey, it's them while we're at it. Also in here, we've got Billy Bird, who she was in literally everything. The second you see her, you're like, oh yeah, I know her. She's in a lot of John Hughes movies. So if you watched like any John Hughes movies, she's in most of them. She was in like 16 Candles and Home Alone and, all that. And once again, if you watched any TV in like the 80s or 90s, she was constantly showing up for an episode here or there. So yeah, you will immediately recognize her the second that you see her, but she's the woman that mans the counter at the Children's Museum that we first meet Joe at, and then ends up kind of getting together with Santa Claus at the end.
I want to talk about, probably, even when I was a kid watching this movie, there were two characters I did not like, and I still do not like them. I didn't like him in the other Ernest movies, and I didn't like him in the Ernest TV show. Chuck and Bobby. Bill Burge plays Bobby. They're clearly trying to do a Laurel and Hardy kind of thing with these characters. Bill Burge is pretty much known for the Ernest movies. That is, he really hasn't done any movies outside of those movies. Gaylord Sartan? Yeah. Gaylord Sartan plays Chuck. He's definitely the Hardy of the two, and he actually did play Oliver Hardy in a Laurel and Hardy reboot movie with Bronson Pinchot. That movie was about as good as it sounds. I think probably outside of the Ernest movies, his claim to fame will probably be playing the Big Bopper in the Buddy Holly story. So, I mean, Chuck and Bobby in this movie, they play workers at the airport who take in all of these packages, and 8 or 9, technically, 9 packages arrive at the airport, and they're moving and they're shaking, and they are to be picked up by someone named Helper Elves. Or is it M? Yeah, there's a very unfunny bit where they can't decide if it's an M or a V. I'm sure some kids laughed at it. I didn't back in the day. Their entire thing is to add a little bit more slapstick into this movie. And yeah, the 9 packages eventually open. 8 of them are reindeer, and the 9th is the sleigh. When I honestly remember the reindeer effects being better as a kid, probably because I was a kid. Because they play a lot of sound effects of the reindeer dashing and jumping and flying during those early scenes, but you don't actually see them. They're on the floor, you cut to the actors, you hear a zoom sound effect, and they shoot their heads up, and now we're shooting a scene of the reindeer on the roof of the building, but it's the film trick. They film it upside down, and yeah, that whole part I could live without, even as a kid watching this movie. I get that they're here to kind of add runtime, add a little bit more comedy, some little silly stuff for the kids, but even as a kid, I didn't find it funny.
Yeah, and herein lies my problem with this film is I watched this entire film, and I am going to ask you to guess how many times I laughed during the course of this film.
I'm going to say not many.
The answer is 0. I laughed 0 times during the course of this supposed comedy film. The thing that made me go was at the very beginning of the film where Santa Claus shows up at the airport and he presents his passport and it lists that his passport is from Prussia, which was a country that was already not a country anymore by the time of this film. And I found that mildly amusing, and thus ended the things in this movie that I found even mildly amusing. Because here's the thing, they forgot to write jokes for their comedy film, because as you said earlier, the entire Ernest character is built on Jim Varney has a rubber face, and he's the Ernest character is built on being annoying and stuff. And here are things that I personally do not find funny. Being annoying for the sake of being annoying, shoving your face really close to the camera, mispronouncing words to sound like other words when there's no other joke behind it. At one point, Ernest says he has extra sensatory perspiration. To me, that alone is not funny. There are ways to make that sort of thing funny, but there has to be another layer behind it. The Marx Brothers were really good at that sort of thing because there was always a second layer to that joke. It wasn't just well, what's a word starting with P that sort of sounds like perception? Perspiration. Okay, just throw that in there. That's kind of the end all be all of the Ernest character. To me, slapstick can be very funny when used correctly, but given the rest of the stuff that's wrapped up in the character, it's not, and also just putting on a weird voice, I was explaining to somebody the other day, it took me years to realize that Bobcat Goldthwait was funny because he spent 30 years doing that weird voice. But once he dropped the weird voice, if you listen to his stand-up now, his stand-up is really funny. He's really sharp, and his stand-up is really funny. But I couldn't get past that, weirdness for years. It was just And that was the same thing with kind of the Pee-wee character, Paul Rubens put on that voice, and it's I don't know, maybe there was some humor in that, but I could not make it past just things like that. There always has to be something else behind it, just doing that is really shallow to me. And that's kind of my problem with Ernest as a character, is it's very shallow. There's nothing else behind it, unfortunately, and I really wanted it to be a little deeper than it was. And I agree with you about those other two characters. I really hated any time they were on screen. because they had even less depth than Ernest. Like the one guy that was the Hardy of the group, his only shtick was, I can move my eyeballs really fast in a really weird way. And to me, it's like, okay, that's a stupid human trick you do on David Letterman. That's not a thing to build an entire comedy bit around.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about one thing here, because we do get a bit of the backstory of Santa. Like I said, he fully says that he is not the original Santa Claus. He is. I do find it kind of funny that he says, like I inherited the role of Santa Claus in the 1890s from a German fellow. It's kind of trying to get you the idea of which of if you know your history of the various Yuletide people that were the various people that inspired Santa Claus. It's kind of funny, And it's also funny that it's that specific year, because I believe that is when "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" came out, the poem. I did find that funny that it technically implies that was written about this particular Santa Claus when he took over the role. That's my own headcanon, but, your mileage may vary. But to get to the main part of here, as Santa Claus says, he needs to pass the role down by 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, or the magic of Christmas will be lost forever. And like I said, Joe is still filming his movie. He's very uncomfortable with it. He has a meeting with the director and his agent and producers about, how uncomfortable he is with the movie. Santa has already confronted Joe, saying, hey, if you change your mind, please meet me at the Children's Museum, and this can happen. Ernest has gone back to the airport to pick up the elves and the reindeer and the sleigh, because they've established very early in the movie that he's a very reckless driver, and he's the only driver crazy enough to get through Orlando traffic. Meanwhile, Harmony has stolen the magic sack. As, like I said, she's trying to go through the magic sack and get something that will make her life better. Money, jewelry, something that will be better off of. But because this is Santa's magic sack, all that's inside are toys. So she's decided that she's going to take what little money she has, get on a train, get out of Orlando, and try again to try to get something out of Santa's magic sack that will help her in any kind of way. Harmony ends up encountering, and there is this kind of moment there that Harmony has her heart grows 3 sizes that day moment, where she meets this family trying to get a train to go somewhere for Christmas. I think it's a grandmother's or something like that. And the older brother is kind of teasing the younger sister because she still believes in Santa Claus. And eventually Harmony has enough and says, yes, Santa Claus is real. I know Santa Claus. I've met Santa Claus. This is Santa Claus's magic sack right here. So she finds this moment within her of not necessarily finding the spirit of Christmas, but understanding that children do need to believe in Santa Claus. And as the kid said, if that's Santa's magic sack, why do you have it? Why are you here? And that it's a longer scene, yes, and it goes on for way too long.
By the way, Santa's Magic Sack is my new punk rock band.
Yeah, she's going to have to do the right thing and return Santa's magic sack back to him. I'm sorry, dear listener, if you were taking a drink every time I said Santa's magic sack. I apologize. I'm not paying the hospital bill.
They are very dead by now if they were doing that.
We get to the airport, and Ernest makes it to the airport just in time for Santa's elves to make it to the airport. And they go and pick up the reindeer. And Ernest has procured like a Ryder U-Haul type of truck that he's going to throw the sleigh and the reindeer in there. But like I said, Ernest is an idiot and actually goes the wrong way out of the airport and pops all the tires on the truck. So they have no choice but to actually set up the sleigh, get the reindeer together, and they are going to ride the magic sleigh all the way back to the Children's Museum just in time for Santa to pass on the magic. This is a very long scene that takes about half an hour of the movie, which is Ernest driving the sleigh.
And there is so much product placement in this sequence. If you take a drink every time there is product placement in this one sequence alone, you will be dead by the end of the sequence.
It's almost like they had to get every single product Ernest has ever hawked in the movie. So yeah, Ernest has to learn all of the reindeer's names because that's how the poem goes. That's how they go. On Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, you know the rest. And the effect of the sleigh, again, it looked better when I was a kid because I was a kid. And they use a lot of camera tricks to make this takeoff and this reckless flight look decent. Like, you don't actually see the sleigh rising up into the sky. It's a camera, first person view, and they're shaking the it's very much old school Star Trek as they're shaking the camera while the actors are going, whoa, we're gonna die.
Dude, can you imagine Jim Varney on Star Trek?
We could have done it.
No, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, but the wide shots of a very obvious still model of the sleigh and a little Ernest figurine as it zooms by the screen. But yeah, there's a lot of product placement. They fly by a lot of billboards, bust through a few. This takes up about 20 minutes of the movie, is them trying to ride the sleigh and Ernest losing control of the sleigh, and they go out into outer space and they circle the Earth several times over, Superman 1 style. It's a scene that's very hard to describe in an audio format because the movie itself is hard to describe in an audio format because most of the movie is very physical comedy.
I mean, you're using comedy loosely, but sure.
But it's enough that it convinces Joe that, hey, that old man really is Santa Claus because Ernest on the sleigh passes by the studio just as Joe is looking out to try to decide if he's going to keep doing this movie or not. So Joe looks out the window, he sees the sleigh flying, and then he says, he really is Santa Claus. I'm going to be Santa Claus. Yeah, I'm not passing up this opportunity. So now it's a race to the Children's Museum before 7 o'clock between Ernest, Harmony, and Joe, as Santa's already there.
And Santa Claus is very sad because he thinks Joe has stood him up and there will be no one to take on the mantle of Santa Claus, and the magic will die.
But as all this happens, here comes Harmony with the sack. I'm sorry, Santa. I'm sorry I stole your sack. Here. I'm sorry. I was inspired by you, and I even called my mom. And after we're done here, I'm gonna go home. Wish we had seen that. I don't know if that's a deleted scene or not, but would have been nice if she had just reached to a payphone and we actually see her call her mom and saying, I'm sorry I ran away. I'm coming. But yeah, and Joe finally shows up and he believes and he's ready to take on the mantle of Santa Claus. And no falling off of a roof in this movie. It's just a handshake. You're Santa Claus. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm glad that in this movie Santa doesn't have to die for the next Santa to take over.
And Joe wants to do something, if I'm Santa Claus now, I have to do something worthy of Santa Claus. At the beginning of the movie, when Santa Claus is in an airport, he meets up with a very Scrooge-like businessman who kind of says, man, working on Christmas, doing this big deal. And, the one thing I want for Christmas is snow. Snow in Orlando? Yeah, I know it's a long shot, but man, it's been a long time since I had a Christmas with snow. And Santa tells Joe this, and his first official act as the new Santa Claus, Joe makes it snow in Orlando.
Joe is a douche.
I mean, it actually did snow in Orlando, but that's a different situation.
There's a reason people live in places where it doesn't snow, says the person who lives in a place where it doesn't snow that often.
But, it's enough for that Scrooge stand-in as he's having this very intense meeting. Again, this is the first time we've seen this character since the beginning of the movie, saying, I don't care if it's Christmas Eve, we gotta get this business deal done tonight, or it's not happening at all. Snow, just like back home. You know what? We'll deal with this later, and Merry Christmas. And after all of this, we finally get Ernest with the sleigh, making it, he's about to crash, and then I know this scene only because it's in every commercial for this movie. Him stopping the sleigh right before they crash, and he turns to the camera and says, air brakes. Which, it would be nice if we hadn't seen a scene earlier where he broke the breaks. Sure, whatever, it's a movie.
Yeah, why put logic in this movie now?
But yeah, now that the sack is here, now that the sleigh is here, now that Joe is the new Santa Claus, he can get going and do his job, and well, the adventure is over. And Joe decides, is it against the rules to have helpers on this ride? And Santa says, well, there's no rules saying that there isn't. And Ernest says, I knew you'd come crawling back to me. I am an expert. I can drive anything. All excited because who would pass up the opportunity to go on the ride with Santa Claus? And they also take Harmony on as their honorary elf on this trip. And yeah, so the three of them are off on the ride, the Christmas Eve ride. All the children are going to get their presents, and it's a Merry Christmas for everybody. And like you said, now that he's retired, Santa and the children museum lady have a moment. Looks like they're getting together here, and that's how the movie ends.
Well, there is that one little teaser at the end of the movie where the two characters that we both hate get the package and they can't decide if it's for E Bunny or F Bunny, and then rabbit ears poke out of the package.
For a sequel that will never come.
Thank goodness.
Like I said, Jim Varney would make several Ernest movies after this, up until his passing. And there was an attempt at a reboot not too long ago, Son of Ernest, but nothing ever happened from that. And I'm going to be honest, you can't do Ernest without Jim Varney. Whether you're a fan of the Ernest character or not, Jim Varney is Ernest, and no one else could play this character. It's like someone else playing Pee Wee Herman. If they announce tomorrow there's going to be a Pee Wee Herman reboot with someone else in that role, it'd be terrible.
Yeah, there are just some things you shouldn't do.
Let's wrap it up here. Kiki, I already know your answer, but does Ernest Saves Christmas have the magic?
Not for me. If this is your jam, more power to you. There is nothing in this movie that appeals to me. I really wanted to like it. I went in with a very open mind about it, and I was so sadly disappointed. I wanted there to be more to this movie than there was.
I still have a soft spot for this movie. I'm going to say it does have magic. Like I said, there are some parts that are just didn't work in retrospect, but I think that the movie still has enough heart that it can work as a Christmas classic. I do like the Ernest character. I do have a soft spot for this movie. So it is magic for me. Again, your mileage may vary, but at least as far as I'm concerned, I will say that Ernest Saves Christmas has some magic. As for next week, it's another movie where we're talking about passing the mantle of Santa Claus onto someone else. Yes, it is The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, finally getting into that franchise. And there's a lot to talk about with this, because not only the original movie, but the sequels and the TV show. So that's going to be interesting to talk all about that. So come back next week for The Santa Claus, and we'll talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social. And new episodes are available at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic. Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.